Well, it's a few minutes past the 4 o'clock. In respect of everybody's time, I'd like to start this Assembly Select Committee hearing on the hate crime. And good afternoon, and welcome to the public hearing on bias-related bullying awareness with the Assembly Select Committee on hate crime. And thank you all for your interest in being here. I want to especially a shout out for our good supervisor, Dave Cortese and Cindy Chavez, who are really co-sponsoring this event. Thank you very much. I didn't get that clap, but it's okay. We're in this beautiful county chamber. My name is Kansen Chu. I'm the chair of the Assembly Select Committee on Hate Crime. And I'm happy to be co-hosting this hearing with our good supervisor from Santa Clara County. Is there any other elected officials in the audience? Because I have invited many of the members from the State Assembly to join me. I also see the Deputy Sheriff, Rick Song, in the audience as well. Thank you very much for your interest. I created the Select Committee on Hate Crime last year in response to the rise of hate crime throughout the state of California. In addition to myself, the committee is made up of 10 of my colleagues in the California State Assembly. The Assembly Select Committee on Hate Crime serves as a tool to foster community engagement and open dialogue and collaboration for ethnic and religious organizations, LGBTQ groups, law enforcement, nonprofit, and other organizations. As much as California has strived to be a most inclusive and progressive state in the United States, we still have the highest number of hate crime and the highest number of hate groups, and a sharp increase in the hate and bullying related crimes, even though those crimes are generally underreported. So last year, I have asked the state auditor's office, and we did a hate crime audit. I believe we have hard copies somewhere in the chamber, and if you're interested, you can also download it from the state auditor's website. I have hosted various hearings about the hate crime, but today, the focus will be on our youth in school. Children are facing discrimination in school, and I want to provide an opportunity for us to hear about the impact, trends, and most importantly, the solutions. Today we'll hear from our district attorneys, community organizations, and school representatives. So it's pretty much breaking into 3 different panels. And the first panel will be the district attorneys from both Santa Clara counties and Alameda County. And we just very happy to recognize Assemblymember Clara. Oh, just joining us to our right. Thank you very much. And I did see a hand up there. You know, I think she is a elected official. Okay, but without further ado, I'd like to give the podium to my colleague, Clara, to say a few words.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Chair Kansen Chu, and I want to start by thanking you. We have limited scope and time and energy of what we can do when we're in Sacramento because we have a very broad purview. And so the fact that Kansen took it upon himself to create and chair the Select Committee on Hate Crime, I think speaks volumes to the priorities that Assemblymember Chu has. And so I'm very pleased to be on the committee with him, and under his leadership, I think that we're setting a very positive tone as a state that it's incumbent upon us as leaders from Sacramento to our counties and our cities, and certainly in our schools, do whatever we can to combat hate crimes in general, but also more at the ground level, ensuring that we're doing things in a compassionate, loving way, and that we're really, truly learning about our neighbors and not waiting until something bad happens, but rather doing things proactively that are productive and have us become closer as a community. And so for that, I'm very grateful to Assemblymember Chu. And I say this oftentimes as well, and I think Kansen would agree, that we're very lucky in Sacramento to be able to represent Santa Clara County. And I know that Senator Chu also has the great benefit of also being able to represent Alameda County as well. But for me, since I only represent the city of San Jose and Santa Clara County, it makes my job, it makes our job so much easier, because certainly some of our colleagues from other parts of the state don't always have the support from the county, don't always have the support from local law enforcement, don't always have support from their city councils. There's a lot of conflict at times, especially when we talk about protecting our immigrant community, especially when we talk about ensuring that we're creating a safe space for everyone. There's a lot of difference of opinions as well as different ideologies, and I feel very fortunate that being from San Jose, being from Santa Clara County in particular, with leaders like Supervisor Cortese and Chavez, that we're always on the same page, and it's about moving forward, and it's always about protecting and serving our community. And I never have to second guess whether the county is going to be supporting what we're doing, and likewise, Kansen and I are always going to do whatever we can to support the work of our local counties, because they're on the right side of the issues and are always trying to engage the community. So that's why I think it's absolutely appropriate we're having this hearing here with our friends Supervisors Chavez and Cortese, who we work very closely with when we're in Sacramento on a wide range of issues, and we get great feedback from our county, again, supporting our work. And so for that, I'm grateful, and I'm certainly grateful for everyone for being here, so thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Clara. And I would like to ask the Supervisor Dave Cortese to have an opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much, Assemblyman Chu, and thank you also for being here, Assemblymember Clara. The county has a long history and tradition, when asked, of hosting these legislative hearings here, and it is really a privilege to do it. And I think it's a privilege, in a sense, for our community, particularly stakeholders, to be able to come forward and address their members of their legislative delegation, in this case, as well as county supervisors, who, as you just alluded to, as you both just alluded to, can actually implement actions to deal with issues that are very frustrating for people, to say the least, from a public policy standpoint, when they see them occurring in our community. So I want to thank you all. I want to thank Supervisor Chavez particularly for really having that sixth sense over the last few years, and particularly after the presidential election of 2016, to realize that we need to convene folks here around these issues. We both take some credit, I think, for convening hearings a year ago, a little less than a year ago, January of this year, around immigration and women's issues. But I put the credit squarely with Supervisor Chavez going back to about 2013 for getting some of these issues out of the shadows and into the public arena here at the county, around human trafficking, around hate crimes, and around bullying. And so I'm sure she'll have plenty to say in terms of what she's seen and why she feels it's so important for both the county and the state to be fully engaged. As recently as yesterday, I was asked to sit down with a woman who is an executive, a business executive in this community, who wanted a little bit of my time to explain that her daughter had been sexually assaulted as a high school student, actually on campus in this community. And of course, I'm not going to reference the case or specific names, but after what we've seen just recently with Dr. Ford's testimony before a committee of the United States Senate, in the bullying that occurred on a national level, not over somebody's race, creed, or just generally the way they look, but over their political beliefs, and much, much deeper than that, to see an adult essentially bullied on the national level about coming out with facts and testimony around a sexual assault that occurred during the teenage years tells us all that that's an issue that we need to make sure is on the agenda. And I hope that if anyone wishes to speak to that kind of bullying, that aspect of intimidation and fear that suppresses the kind of information that we need when those kind of assaults are going on among our young people in this community. I hope that you'll come forward. In the case that I had, that I listened to yesterday, I could only think how much fear that young woman, 15 years old, this is happening now, not 40 or 50 years ago, like we heard with Dr. Ford, but a case that is happening now with a 15-year-old assaulted by a senior in high school on her own high school campus. And what kind of bullying can and will occur when that individual comes out into the public and becomes an advocate so that that doesn't happen to someone else. So I just wanted to put that out there as something that I hope your committee continues to look at, Assemblyman Chu, in addition to all of the anti-bias work and the community engagement work around bias-related bullying that we're going to be talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. I will ask Supervisor Chavez to give us an opening remark.
Thank you. And first of all, I want to thank all of you very much for being here. And I see we have some very young members here, too. A grandchild, maybe, of Kansen?
That's right. That's my granddaughter,
Aw,
Kimberly.
And so let's give her a round of applause for being here. Thank you so much. We're starting them very young, right? We want to get them engaged. I'm really excited to have really both Assemblymember Clara and Assemblymember Chu here, and I just want to thank you so much for doing this and for bringing it home to us. And just to say a couple things about the work we're doing and make a point about some of what Dave just raised. So first of all, it's easy to think about Santa Clara County as kind of a safe place. And I think, Dave, what you just pointed out is that we have so much work to do, and you're going to help us understand what more we can do on this. And I also just wanted to say that Dave and I led 3 hearings here, one that was focused on women, one that was focused on hate crimes and really climate, and the other that was focused on immigration. And this was really in response to the national election as it occurred because, and many of you were here, because people really didn't know what were the implications of having really a bully running the country. And how was that going to impact all of us at a local level? How do we talk to our children about it? How do we better understand that? So out of that, we came up with a number of policies, and one that I wanted to share with you was a county anti-bullying policy. And in the next month, the staff will come back with the implementation of that policy because we both wanted to be able to make sure that all of our outward-facing organizational work and individual work really was understood through this lens of being welcoming and inclusive. And so there's a lot of work to be done there, but I'm very excited about that. And I'll just close because I know our staff's going to talk about some of the work they're doing to make this observation. I had no idea how pervasive bullying would be when I was a child throughout our lives. I think we often think of bullying as something that happens on college campuses or high school campuses, not so much college, but really for children. And the truth of the matter is we have a whole new norm that's being accepted at a national level. And the other part of that that's sort of astounding to me is that Dave and I were in a hearing yesterday where we had an advocate for seniors talk about bullying with seniors at senior organizations and in senior housing. And So I say that because it's a human condition that we're trying to address. And so one of the reasons I'm so excited that we're doing this is I'm really interested in hearing from all of you the very good work that you're doing. And again, I want to thank Dave and Kansen and Ash for just all of your leadership and amazing work. And I'm excited to hear from all of you.
Thank you, Supervisor Chavez. And before we move on, I have a few housekeeping items to ensure that we hear from everyone. I would love to take this opportunity to recognize that this public hearing will focus on a very sensitive topic, and I expect everyone to conduct in a really respectful manner. I ask that the panelists to keep their presentation to the time allocated, which is roughly 7 minutes. I apologize. I know on this topic, any one of our distinguished panelists can take probably 70 minutes to address those issues, but we have a really very tight schedule, so I ask the panelists to keep their time within 7 minutes, and each panel will be followed by a Q&A portion for members on the dais and asking questions of the presenter. There will be 3 panels and time for the public comment at the end. So the bio of all the panelists are in your handout, so I'm not going to take too much time to introduce them. But we'll start out with the first panel, and we have the Assistant District Attorney from Santa Clara County and Alameda County. So please join me in welcome James Gibson Sapiro from the Santa Clara County, and also the Teresa Drednick is the Assistant District Attorney from Alameda County.
Good afternoon, Assemblymember Clara, Assemblymember Chu, Supervisor Cortese, and Supervisor Chavez. Thank you very much for inviting the Alameda County District Attorney's Office to participate in this important hearing today. I'm here representing my office and District Attorney Nancy O'Malley. We are, as an office, and certainly DA O'Malley, have been for years now committed to working to improve our county's response to both hate crimes as well as bullying within our schools. And as Supervisor Chavez mentioned, outside of schools as well. We have many different programs and outreach efforts in our communities to address what we are now seeing as a huge rise in not only hate crimes, but hate-related speech and hate-related conduct. We have created a hotline for members of our community to call in that we monitor 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and respond to in real time with a real person. We have multilingual folks within our office who answer and help. We also know that the well-being of our students is very much affected by bullying within the school setting. That is not just their ability to thrive within school, but also their desire to attend school at all. We're seeing a rise in school refusal, in school absenteeism, and school truancy, and that is something that I run our truancy and attendance unit, and I work very closely with our 18 school districts in our county, including Fremont Unified, on that topic. What I wanted to discuss briefly is the law surrounding bullying, and the fact that the California Penal Code actually doesn't define bullying as a crime. It doesn't define bullying at all. We cannot go into a courtroom with the person charged with the crime of bullying. It doesn't exist. And I think that when we're talking about this framework from the DA perspective, it's important to know what tools we have to enter a courtroom and support both the victim and hold a perpetrator accountable for bullying conduct. There are 4 major penal code sections that we turn to. One is Penal Code Section 653, in which a person using an electronic device makes repeated harassing contact with another. When we were teenagers and kids, it was the nonstop phone calling and hanging up, or phone calling and making mean or threatening comments, and that's been now, of course, expanded to any means of electronic communication, which is front and center in cyberbullying. Penal Code Section 422 is basically covering threats, and that is when a person threatens to kill or physically harm somebody, and that threat is taken seriously, in fact, is believed, and it is unequivocal and immediate. The law was changed several years back to include that threat can be done via writing, verbally, or electronic communication. And again, the addition of the electronic communication is key when we're talking about cyberbullying and cyber threats. There's a penal code section that prohibits the impersonation of another online. So, for example, I think this happens often in schools where a student will be in the library doing work, sign into his or her email address and forget to sign out. You leave and suddenly you're logged in still as yourself, and another student will come, sit down at that computer terminal, realize that he or she can take advantage of that open portal, and then threatens or harasses others, impersonating the individual. And that is something that we're seeing more and more take place in the school settings. And the final penal code section that's something that we really rely upon is cyber stalking. So traditionally, I've been in the DA's office for 27 years. In my first 10 years in the office, if I had a stalking case, it was what we traditionally think of, somebody who was constantly showing up at someone's house, following them to work, following them around school, and creating fear that way. And the cyber stalking statute incorporates that nonstop following, but via an online platform. And that can be, as we all know, just as terrifying as the in-person stalking. My colleague here and I are going to share our 7 minutes each and combine it to be a full 14 minutes to be a little more dynamic for you. So I'm going to turn over to my colleague from this county and talk a little bit more about bullying.
Sure. Thank you again for having us. First, I wanted to say that we're really lucky in Santa Clara County that our Board of Supervisors has supported the DA's office to have community prosecutors to do outreach in the community on all sorts of issues, including bullying and hate crimes. And so, for example, last year, one of our community prosecutors organized a conference at Google to have a partnership between technology companies, schools, and law enforcement to address how we can work together to address bullying online and with technology devices. Similarly, our community prosecutors are in the schools, not just to think about when there's a crime, but when there's bullying and harassment that doesn't rise to the level of a crime, but is still very hurtful, both to the individuals who are being targeted and to the whole school community. And to think about how we can address when that happens for those perpetrators, but also how we can address healing in the whole school community. And so I think it was last year at Fremont High School in Sunnyvale, not only was there a series of incidents involving racial and religious harassment, there was an intervention that not only dealt with the perpetrators of that harassment and tried to help the victims of that harassment, but really for the whole school community to have a healing past that. And I think that's something that's important for us to work on and to think about. As far as where bullying and hate crimes intersect, I want to remind the Select Committee and the members of the audience about an incident that happened in our community a couple years ago at San Jose State. There was a San Jose State student who was the subject of, one would say at the beginning bullying, but at the end hate crimes by his suite mates. He was an African-American student, and at the end he was put in a bike lock by his white suite mates. But before then, there was displays of the swastika in their dorm suite. There was the Confederate flag. There was use of a version of the N-word. It was referring to him as 3/5, which is a reference to the U.S. Constitution that referred to African Americans as 3/5 of a person in its original documentation. And one of the things I wanted to highlight for all of you about that was the end of that case was the jury found these 3 white defendants guilty of crimes, but did not find them guilty of hate crimes. And the reason why I want to highlight that to you is because even we talk a lot about implicit bias in our community. This was an example of explicit bias, but there really was a challenge for these members of the jury to label young white college students as racist. That's how they viewed what their decision was going to be doing. And that made it, I think, an extra burden to overcome. And so while it was very brave for this African-American student and his family to come forward, it was, I think, really a disappointment for our, let's just say, for our DA's office and for the law enforcement community that we were unable to convince a jury that what we viewed as a series of very explicit, racially motivated incidents and ultimately an attack as more than just an attack, but as a hate crime. So I'm going to turn it back to my colleague, and then we'll keep on tag teaming it.
In addition to seeing hate crimes that are race-based or religion-based crop up in our school, of course, we're seeing a lot of cyberbullying that centers around sexual sexting and gender-based. One thing that we have found so important is to go into our schools at various age levels, so we don't believe that elementary school is too young as long as a presentation is age appropriate, and start talking at that time about the dangers that can crop up from being too explicit either to boys or girls in terms of what is being posted online, and then what trouble that they can get into both emotionally, socially, as well as vis-a-vis school discipline and maybe within the criminal justice system if they engage in sexting and cyberbullying in this arena. So, and it spills also, I heard somebody mention human trafficking. It spills into that arena too with sexually exploited minors. And we find that young people in the 5th and 6th grade are not too young to engage in this conversation. And as the students progress in school, that middle school and then again in high school, it's critical that we as leaders in the community, both from the law enforcement side as well as community-based organization side, really have very explicit and meaningful conversations. And one thing that I am told over and over by the students that I work with is that these assemblies or chats or informational sessions work much better when they are led by students themselves. And I think that that's something key for us all to remember, that oftentimes they don't want to hear from us. They want to hear from their peers. And so peer training and then peer-to-peer interaction is really, really strong.
I know we're running out of time. I wanted to address an aspect of bullying on campus that we haven't talked about yet. So the California Education Code allows schools and school districts to discipline students or to take other kinds of interventions when there's bullying on campus. And I think it's misunderstood or maybe not understood enough that that extends to acts that involve members of the school community that occur off campus or not within school hours. So if you have an incident where high school students, for example, are texting each other within a group or are harassing someone on social media, and it's happening at school, after school, away from school, but all the people are, or most of the people are part of the school community, the school does not have to say, wow, that doesn't involve us. In fact, actually very much it does involve us, and the school is the best place, I think, to work on that community problem because the community that's being targeted is part of that school community. And we our community prosecutors of the DA's office are here to partner with our local schools to help you to figure out, first of all, what is a violation of the California Education Code, but also what kind of interventions that are student-led, that are something that students can buy into and they can heal a community that we can work on together.
And in addition to working with the students, it's also vital that programming is targeted toward the parents, both of students who are bullied as well as parents of the students who are bullying. Studies show that the kids do not fall into one category or the other. Oftentimes, a young person who is bullied can also become a bully or vice versa. And one main point that I think is critical to take away for parents is that, A, it doesn't make any sense to tell a child, oh, just don't go online, because it's not realistic. And it seems, oh, it's so easy, just don't look at your Instagram account or don't turn on your computer. And that is not the right answer. And then the other is not to threaten to take away the device as a punishment, because that just drives the victimization underground, and children will be too, or young people are too then afraid to come out and tell a teacher or tell a parent for fear of having their device taken from them, which has become a lifeline and a way of social interaction that is the norm rather than not. I believe that we've run through our 14 minutes there. That went fast.
Great, thank you very much. No, I really appreciate that presentation and the information you mentioned about the information provided to the parents. Is that online, or is that somewhere that we'll be able to help you get the words out?
So in Alameda County, we go regularly into the schools, and we have a presentation that is for the students. And the evening before the students get their presentation, we present to the parents. Schools also, like PTAs or parent groups, reach out to us, and we're on call to come and give presentations. And we have a PowerPoint that we update. I'm so old in the office that when I first did this PowerPoint, we were still talking about MySpace. Now nobody knows what that is anymore. But we do try to keep current. And I'm happy to share that, the presentation that we have pulled together. And I always welcome help in sort of letting the community know that we will come anywhere that we're asked to come, that a group feels we would be of help.
Great. So you'll be able to put it online and people have access to it?
Yes.
Because this is really one of the burning question for me as people of color. I was always wondering, should I teach my children or grandchildren about bullying, about discrimination, about prejudice, or what should I teach them? So I would really be very interested what you have there for the parents. And looks like, Ash, that we have some work ahead of us. We redefine, maybe revisit the definition of hate crime, so we'll be able to make the DA to have a stronger case. Was that, do you have any additional questions on this?
No, thank you, Kansen, and it's great to hear from Ms. Drenick and Mr. Gibbons-Shapiro. Of course, for those that don't know, I was a deputy public defender for 11 years and had the chance to get to know James well as a very ethical and responsible prosecutor, and it's great to hear the work, thanks to the county as well as the district attorney's office, of the community prosecutors. I've gotten a chance to know a lot of them over the years. I think it's an incredibly important program that we have, and when I think about prosecution, there are two sides to the need to have the sophistication at the prosecutorial level in terms of understanding the community and understanding hate crimes, especially as it applies to a lot of what we've been seeing more recently against immigrants, LGBTQ community, and so on. And that applies in two ways. One that James referred to was how it's prosecuted, ensuring we're actually prosecuting these crimes as hate crimes, but also from the defense perspective, sometimes the response from someone that is being bullied or victimized, and they respond back, and understanding the context of that, if they're a Muslim American or they're a Sikh American or LGBTQ, and they're being bullied in a variety of ways, including electronically. and then they respond back, and they're the ones that get prosecuted, understanding to dig deeper on the context of exactly what's going on in that school or in that community or in that neighborhood. And I think that is particularly since we've seen in the last couple of years in particular, increased number of hate crimes towards African Americans, Latino Americans, and LGBTQ, and of course, over several years, and even though I think we've seen an increased level of intensity against Muslim Americans, and certainly with the South Asian community, elderly Sikh Americans are getting beaten, and it's just been a horrible a few years. But what's worse is in some other counties or other states, they don't even get prosecuted as hate crimes. At least here, we have prosecutors that are at least identifying it as hate crimes. The issue might be with the juries or with how you actually are able to prove it, and that's something that Kansen makes a good point about, of making sure that the way the laws are written allows the prosecutors the tools to be able to actually prosecute it in a way that's most effective. And so the one question I do have is, because I just don't frankly know at the ground level, I do know, for example, our San Jose Police Department, when they're going through the academy, they meet with Muslim American leaders. They go to the Gurdwara and meet with the Sikh American community to understand the community better. And I know we have our community prosecutors, but in terms of our line prosecutors that are making the charging decisions, that are prosecuting the cases, to what extent, if at all, in either county, are they actually going through either training or interacting with the community outside, again, of the community prosecutors? Is there a process, or do the community prosecutors bring folks to them or bring information to them? So just curious as to what's going on the ground level.
Well, I'll first say that I think that we can do better. Santa Clara County is an incredibly diverse community with languages that are more than we can count, more than the people in this room, or the number of languages spoken in Santa Clara County. And it's a continuous challenge to make sure that we're sensitive to all the different kinds of groups within the county. But for hate crimes in particular, one of the ways we've tried to deal with that is that any case that has any part that might be related to a hate crime, that goes to a special unit that I supervise, so that we're making sure that the people who are reviewing those are people who are up on all the current law, and also are trying to be sensitive as they can, to all the different kinds of communities that we have here in the county.
And for our office as a whole, not just attorneys, but our inspectors and our victim witness staff, we all have bias training on a regular basis, implicit bias training. We also do have a unit that specializes in hate crime. And as I mentioned earlier, we, several years back, established a call-in hotline that we all, as you here in Santa Clara County, there are more languages that can be counted. It's spoken in Alameda County, and we are very conscientious about making sure that we have people who can work in various languages with those who call in. They may not necessarily, the complaint may not necessarily rise to the level of a crime, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't sit down, pay attention, and really focus on how the matter can be addressed. I don't believe that court and prosecution is necessarily the right route for every incident, whether it involves juveniles or adults, but especially in the juvenile setting. At times, there can be a more holistic way to address a situation that heals everybody, not just the person who's being bullied, but as you said, the person who's accused of the bullying. There's a lot more going on there oftentimes below the surface.
Well, I appreciate all the work you're doing, and what might be helpful, especially if you have units that especially focus on that, is actually maybe taking field trips and going to the Jewish American community centers or the African American community centers. And you can't do that every day. I know how busy everybody is, but maybe once every 6 months or once a quarter, having some special type of visit just to get them in the community, because I think that it makes the community feel a lot more comfortable. But otherwise, I do appreciate the sensitivity and the work that you have been doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblymember Clara. Supervisor Cortese.
I just want to say I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate you covering some of the ground that we talked about in our opening comments. Thank you for that.
Supervisor Chavez, you have any question? All right, great. Thank you very much. While to bring the second panelist up on the dais. But before I do that, I want to recognize a representative from Senator Jim Bell's office, Jonathan Perez, and also from Congressman Ro Khanna's office, we have Vivian Liang. Thank you very much. All right, can we go back to the intro panel with all the names, the panelist name? Who's controlling? There we go. Okay, so just wanted to ask the panelists, I don't know if any particular order that you have worked out?
I think we're sitting in the order that we're going to speak in.
Sitting on the order, okay. So we have just Maha would be the first speaker.
Yes. So I wanted to begin by thanking everyone for holding this hearing, and especially thanks Simone for doing an incredible job in organizing us. I had a lot of dealings with her, and when I look at the number of people that are speaking on the panel, and in other panels as well, I'm sure that it was a huge effort. So I want to thank her very much for doing such a great job that she did. So she asked us to speak on two topics, and one is the trends, and another on prevention or how do we address these issues. So I'm speaking on the American Muslim population, and I want to begin by talking about trends, by talking first about the political environment that Muslim Americans find themselves in. If you look at any of the polls that are out there on American public sentiment towards Muslims, it's gone from bad to worse, quite frankly. And we know that these numbers are true because several organizations have studied this issue, and they all reinforce each other. One of the ones that I want to mention is the one in 2017 Pew poll, when they looked and asked Americans about their sentiments towards different religious groups. Muslims did, unfortunately, the worst. Some of the views that many Americans have about the compatibility of Islam or how Islam resonates with American values are, as you can see, are incredibly negative. I'm happy to submit this presentation to you as as part of the testimony. The good news is that knowing a person who is a Muslim tends to improve perceptions about them, and that's incredibly important to know. The sources of the negative perceptions, I would say Islamophobia probably is on the top of the list. Islamophobia is the irrational fear that many Americans have of Muslims. And it's not just having a negative perceptions. Islamophobia now has become an industry that is heavily funded, over $100 million over the last 10 years, heavily funded to a handful of individuals that are producing vitriolic information about Muslims and Islam that is being put out on news channels, is being put out through politicians, through pundits, through books that are being written about Muslims. And I think that that's probably the biggest source of Islamophobia, this irrational fear that many Americans have of Muslims. And of course, the political environment around immigration. The result, as you might imagine, is of course harassment and bullying of Muslim children. The organization, the Council on American Islamic Relations, did a study, and they do it every year, and it showed that clearly that Muslim American students experience bullying extensively. 1 out of 2 Muslim American children experience bullying in schools in either harassment and teasing or in some form, and it's gotten worse since the last presidential election. Another common consequence of the political environment is feeling ashamed in current event discussions, again, which is getting worse. The way the teacher might frame the conversation in the frame of us versus them, Arabs or Muslims are usually viewed as the enemy, lacking sensitivity towards the fact that many of these kids actually have relatives in their home countries that teachers are talking about, and then often pointing to Arab and Muslim kids and asking them to become the experts on these issues. And a third consequence is just being really conflicted about their identity. Teens and young people are already conflicted about their identity, but for Muslim American kids, it becomes even worse. I do want to focus on the remedies. Now, how do you turn this around to foster inclusion and prevent bullying of Muslim students? Incredibly important effort to focus on. In fact, I think that 80–90% of our efforts should be in this space. The DAs, the assistant DAs, were talking about training that they do, and Assemblymember Carla talked about the importance of them spending time with the community. In addition to what he recommended, I think that it's also important for us to go out with them when they do training in the schools. Have a Muslim or an Arab representative, have a Sikh representative, an African American, and so forth. I would highly recommend that. School policy is incredibly important. You all know what the laws are and the need for formal anti-bullying program. I was thrilled to hear about Governor Brown signing a bill. I think it's AB 2291. Don't quote me on the number, but it requires that the CDE, that the California Department of Education, provide anti-bullying training, and to also provide resources that a teacher might use. There are a number of ways that a school, that a teacher might work to prevent bullying. We do a lot of educator training, as we do a lot of student education in the schools. Why? Because bullying that is religiously based or ethnic based is actually preventable more than any other kind of bullying, and it happens through education. Why education becomes incredibly important. So I'm going to skip a bunch of slides and go into the importance of enhancing educator understanding of Muslim student backgrounds, addressing common misconceptions, reasonable accommodations for Muslim students. A lot of the sources of bullying comes from the fact that they don't know, basic information about the students that they're dealing with, and then resources for educators, which is what my organization really emphasizes, that we have speakers bureaus that follow First Amendment Center guidelines on how to do this work, to talk about, Islam, how to talk about Judaism, Hinduism, and so forth. We have an Islamic Speakers Bureau, and we do hundreds of these in your county here and throughout the Bay Area. We also have interfaith speakers bureaus where we go out with Jews, Christians, Hindus, and Buddhists together to supplement curriculum. And then we also provide online educator curriculum and answers to over 200 frequently asked questions about Islam and Muslims. So we're very invested in prevention, because I think that religious-based and ethnic-based bullying is preventable through education. Thank you.
Great. That was really encouraging to know that we have organizations that emphasize prevention, and you're very optimistic about that it is can be prevented. So that's great. I would love to have your slides, and so we may be able to include it in my website or something. Great. Thank you very much. Next, we'll have Diane Fisher, please.
Hi, thank you for including me too. And probably not much to your surprise, I also just want to address the atmosphere, for starters, of what our kids are living in. This last week, we saw several examples of overt anti-Semitism in the public sphere. We have the Trump administration using old anti-Semitic tropes to divide and undermine those of us working to uphold our democracy. He accused George Soros of paying the Kavanaugh protesters. Then we had Rudy Giuliani calling Soros the Antichrist. So this is an attempt to paint the thousands of protesters as merely pawns orchestrated by a single Jewish person. Then we had white nationalists distributing flyers at UC Davis and UC Berkeley that blamed Jews for orchestrating the allegations against Kavanaugh. And the flyer said, every time some anti-white, anti-American, anti-freedom event takes place, you look at it, and it's Jews behind it. So, unfortunately, you have both the administration and groups like the Daily Stormer that are using age-old stereotypes of Jews being outside agitators. And this is not only hurtful to the Jewish community, this is hurtful to all the groups on this panel, and it's hurtful to anyone working for social change, right? Because it's a strategy. It's a strategy that's used to divide us and to use anti-Semitism as a tool against all progressive ideas. And it seeks to establish an assumption that real Americans are Christian and white. So all of us sitting here together can reject these conspiracy theories, and we can work together to assert our joint ownership of the public square. And this is what I really want to give a shout out to what ING did, because they put out an awesome and much appreciated statement condemning the anti-Semitic flyers at Davis and Berkeley, and it shows that we will not be divided amongst ourselves. Thanks. So what have I seen in our public schools with respect to anti-Semitism? What I've seen is naive kids picking up on these old anti-Semitic stereotypes from the public environment. And I say that because I've also had the opportunity to meet with the parents of some of these kids who have been perpetrators, and they have clearly tried to raise their kids with good values and respect for all people, and they're horrified to learn what their kids are picking up and how they are expressing these hostilities. And that's why this public conversation is so important, because we need to not only work together, but we want to see the public seeing us work together, and so our kids can pick up on a different narrative. The most recent anti-Semitic student bias incident that I've been aware of was at Las Gatos High School. You may recall last year Las Gatos High put in a new program contracted through Epic Education, which was in response to some racist promposals from the year before. And Epic Education teaches students a protocol. They call it Recognize, Interrupt, and Repair, RIR, for recognizing, interrupting, and repairing microaggressions that happen, right? And this is obviously really hard for students to do. It's hard for adults to do. But they worked on this all year long, and then a group of students put together a mission statement about their school, stating, I quote from it, all students will confront all discrimination or discriminatory speech, will treat others with compassion and stand up for peers who may be experiencing discrimination, will strive to include the community at large to join us in support of this mission. So I took their mission statement and modified it to be a community mission statement, and I posted it up at the JCC where I work, and I got churches and the town museum and as many people around as to post it up like as a pledge that people could sign, right? And this year the school has that poster in every single classroom. But here's the thing, a statement of intentions as an important first step, right? But we all know the actual practice of interrupting discrimination is a much more difficult and messy proposition. So when school started this year, in the classroom, right underneath this lovely poster, an otherwise decent student started harassing a Jewish student. He picked up on the old tropes about Jews and money, jingled a bucket of coins in front of a Jewish student's face and said, oh, you passed the Jew test. And he kept pressing coins towards her and harassing her, implying she was interested in grabbing his money. And this was really not only just hurtful, obviously wrong kind of harassment, but just like it was so disturbing to me that this was a student whose parents came here from the former Soviet Union escaping religious discrimination. And here in America, she was experiencing that. So it took some coaching for this student to be brave enough to step forward and report it to her administration. But I really want to give kudos to the Las Gatos High School administration, how they responded, because they have these materials from Epic Education, which includes a 6-hour interactive online education program that explains implicit bias, and it has exercises for understanding your own bias and thinking about changing them. So instead of just a punitive action of kicking this kid out, they really seized the teachable moment and hopefully made a difference in that student's thinking. So I want to quickly give two proposals today for our county, our state to consider. And one is to set a goal for every school to have that kind of restorative justice opportunity to teach students who commit bullying. So often we're either preaching to the choir, but if we target our funds and our efforts towards those kids who need extra learning, I believe we would have a huge impact. And the other thing I want to raise up is a discussion about the California Healthy Kids Survey. You may be familiar with it. It's a service that is a confidential survey that schools can perform about school climate and safety and how kids feel. And the districts that get tobacco use prevention education funds, they get the money to do this survey, and maybe school districts like Las Gatos have the money, but a lot of places don't do this. And if we don't have the data that reflects the perception of the students, in particular students of different races and religions and backgrounds, on how they feel in their school and whether they feel comfortable or safe, I think it's going to be very hard to address the problem. So I look forward to hearing from our educators on what they think of that survey and whether we can implement that more broadly.
Good, thank you very much. And now we have Interpret Court from Southern California Sikh Coalition.
My name is Inder.
You can use that one? Yeah. Is it working?
There it is. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Inderpreet Kaur. I am from the Sikh Coalition. I am based in Southern California. Sikh Coalition is a national civil rights organization that was found a few moments after 9/11. And much of the work that I do is community-based. I survey the Sikh community to see what they would need. And much of the time I do see is that many of our kids are having issues in schools. And this is because of their appearance. They look a little bit different than most other folks do. A lot of our sons, brothers, husbands, fathers, they wear a turban. And much of the time this turban is viewed as hostile, as foreign. And because of that, our young kids are having a difficult time in schools. I worked with kindergartners, and when they saw their schoolmate wear a small little turban, they told me, "Hey, what's that on your head? Why do you wear that?" Now, this 4-year-old has no idea how to answer this, right? "Oh, it's just my hair bundled up in a ball." There is so much pressure on these young kids to discuss their religion with their classmates. They have no idea what to do. Much of the time, their parents are also recent immigrants. When their parents are asked, "Hey, why does your kid wear a turban to school?" they also say, "Oh, it's our religion. That's about it." And now, what I am currently working on is to make sure that our parents are equipped with the correct resources. If your kid is going through some type of bullying issue, or is being made fun of, or maybe even being harassed by their own educator, how would you possibly address this issue if you have no knowledge of how to even speak to a teacher? We've been training parents on how to address these issues with not just educators, but with principals as well. How to address these issues with their community members. Bullying has become such a taboo topic in the Sikh community that nobody speaks about it. I try to make sure that our community feels brave enough to answer these questions, share the issues that they're going through. Just a few months ago, we saw 2 elderly men get attacked in Northern California. How do we address that? How can we tell the community to start talking about these issues and stand up for themselves? In 2012 and 2013, we surveyed over 500 Sikh students. We conducted focus groups with over 700 students and interviewed 56 students in 4 states: Massachusetts, California, Washington, Indiana. We found that majority of Sikh students, just over 50%, endure school bullying. Over 2/3, or 67%, of Sikh turbaned students shared that they're bullied in school. In Fresno alone, 67% of turbaned Sikh youth complained that they were being harassed, not just by their classmates, but also by their teachers. 51% of the Sikh students six youth believed that school officials did not respond adequately to bullying incidents. And so in response to that, Sick Coalition has come up with an educator's guide. We train teachers on how to address bullying issues that go on with sick students, because these bullying issues are totally different than what other bullying issues may be, because much of the time they are attacked because of their religious identity. They have long hair, they may have facial hair, and sometimes we are a little bit hairier than most people. So this is very different for other students to see growing up. We educate students. We do sick awareness presentations not only in kindergarten areas, but also in high school, because we've learned that no matter what the age is, bullying still occurs in schools. We've also seen that this educator guide will help teachers learn not just about their religious faith, but also their culture. Where do they come from? Why do they practice these values? We're still pushing states to include Sikhism in their educational state standards as well. We also believe that education is a way to go. That is how we can teach other students on how to accept us for who we are, and that just because we look a little different does not mean that we are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Reverend Moore, stage is yours.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm just happy to be here with Diane and Maha. You know, we're co-battlers, and we've been in a lot of fights together, and some that were mentioned here today. I'd also like to thank Jay Shapiro, Jay Borowski, and Jeff Rosen, the DA's office, for the times when the incident at San Jose State did happen. The response was not to so much be punitive to these kids, but to put these kids through education, to train them, to give them a chance to understand what their faults were, and community service. The fight against neo-Nazism, white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, the focus should be on prevention rather than repression. It is crucial that our schools help teach our children to recognize racism, bullying, and hate in all facets of America and the world, and to tackle biases against any American wherever it raises its head. There is no place for racism in our schools, workplace, or communities. When I drove in today, as I came up heading, and often as I pass heading to this building of laws and directions and leadership, I have to pass by a school called Peter Burnett. And as we talk about changing the faces of racism and imperialism in America, we need to look at that school and consider changing the name Peter Burnett. Maybe to something that more folklore for our own community that would represent people of color. And so I have talked with some of my Latino people that perhaps we can look at changing it to a name that would be favorable to that if we're going to tear down racism and hatred and wherever it stands in this county. Also, it's just hurtful to understand that nooses can still be allowed in this city and county. And I've pushed the DA, and I will continue to push the DA, that nooses, the symbols of nooses, should be, I hate using the word sometimes banned, but outlawed from being in this curriculum or being used as any form of a jokery or entertainment. It is a form of intimidation, not just for Black Americans, but also for Latino Americans, if we know the history of the West and how many Latinos were lynched. So we need to tear down and not allow those symbols to be in this county. We must give the DA's office and prosecutor's office instructions on how and what type of forms of punishment happen. But not only happen at schools. This is happening in some of our pro teams here in our county have had it in their workplace. As well as some of the corporations, the beer warehouses, these nooses have popped up. And regardless of how we try to fight this, sometimes they say if it's only one incident, it is not enough to actually be a law against it. But if we're going to do it, we must take a firm stand against hate, the symbols of hate, anything that defines hate in this county immediately and face it. 2008, I came into this office, and since that time, I've had to write 2 resolutions for this state in dealing with hate crimes, hate against people of color. As we said, we were in Los Gatos just last year, fighting that incident. We're constantly having to deal with it here in East Side, incidents of hate that pop up. We must take it seriously, and when jobs are at stake, and when people are at their jobs, performing their jobs, and display symbols of hate or make hasty statements that the wall should have been built to put certain people out of there, we need to face it and make sure that whatever means can be possible to let that person no longer be part of this county, not working. And if so, they need to be retrained, resubmitted. Now, when you go to some of our schools, I'm not going to say any of the names of the schools. I always get in trouble. Y'all know I'm constantly in trouble. But you go to some of our school websites, and when they have links for people to get in contact, to notify you of hate crimes or maybe a bullying, the links are too small. See, you have to go in there and search and look around and try to find the link to click in to put a complaint. Even when we go to our county website, you have to look where to go to find to report hate. When someone has damaged you or hates you or put something on you, you're emotional. You're not always being able to see and be able to find what you need. We need to have it ready available on the county's website as well, so a person can report hate immediately. We should develop a web-based survey to assess hate crimes and bullying. We need to create a scheduled assessment of these programs to administer surveys in an annual or biannual fashion across the county, and respond to any specific area immediately, swiftly, without hesitation. The goal, again, is not to imprison or to punish per se, but to teach and to learn. So one of my resolutions, I said, across the state of California, implement appropriate and substantive diversity training, anti-bias training in their anti-bullying programs or curriculum to all staff, including teachers, administrators, school security personnel, and support staff. All school employees, county employees, city employees, including administrators. Support staff, bus drivers, and security staff should be aware of the various manifestations of hate and be competent to address hate incidents. Training should include in-person anti-bias and conflict resolution methods, procedures for identifying and reporting incidents of racial, religious, and sexual harassment, discrimination, and hate crimes. Strategy for preventing such incidents from occurring should be the job of everyone in this county. We want this county to be a county, as Dr. King said. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. And wherever we are in this county, we're going to shine a light, and that light's going to shine bright that every citizen in this county, immigrant, or whatever they want to say that they are, will feel safe in this place. Anybody that comes to our county will know that this is their home, and we will stand as a sanctuary county against anybody from the outside that comes in. And any elected official, anybody that's not going to support this, we as a county will stand hand in hand to do our best to make sure that that elected individual, that city or county administrator, would not serve this county in any form and fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Moore. We're trying to make the state, not just limit it to the county, right?
Let's do the state, sir.
Right, thank you. And next we have LGBTQ outreach counselor from the Bill Wilson Center, and some anti-bullying active, and some high school students. So we'll let Chris, you go first. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for having me here. My name is Chris Fusatola. I identify as a gay male, and I am honored to be here today because the topic of hate crimes is very near and dear to my heart, being a two-time survivor of a hate crime, one that happened 3 years ago in SF that left me having to fight for my life. I was drugged, I was kidnapped, and I had to jump out of a second-story window to escape. And unfortunately, my parents were there to see me code 3 times on the operating table, and now not only do I have PTSD, but my parents also have secondary PTSD. So the topic of hate crimes are very pervasive in families as well, and can add a lot of mental health stressors on families as well. So I'm here today to talk. I represent the Bill Wilson Center. I'm the LGBT outreach counselor for them. And I'm going to talk about some trends that we've seen with our youth. I go into homeless encampments throughout the county, from Gilroy all the way up to Palo Alto. And I also do a lot of work with our schools in the county. Obviously, cyberbullying is a big thing that a lot of our youth talk about specifically. There's the idea of being catfished by other members of the community yourself. They could be friends And then, the thing about cyberbullying is it allows the perpetrator to remain anonymous, and that only intensifies the feelings and discomfort for the victim. Also, within the community, the LGBT community, we ourselves, I'm going to say we as a community, there is in-community bullying as well, and that's something that people don't understand. There's the ideas of toxic masculinity, the no fats, no femmes, no Asians that fly around. That's a concept that people put on their profiles, on the dating profiles that our youth are being exposed to. There's the idea that one group struggle is more, outweighs the other one, and, I think we just really need to start teaching that, we need to come together to overcome these things. Also, for our homeless youth, there's bullying between themselves. Not respecting pronouns, not using someone's name that they want to be identified as, not respecting their gender identity or sexual orientation, using anti-LGBTQ language or hate speech, both by staff members of nonprofits, both by teachers and the youth themselves. And then also just assuming that people are getting preferential treatment. For instance, we have an LGBTQ drop-in center at Bill Wilson Center, but then we also have the general population drop-in center. And then you'll hear youth saying, well, they're getting special treatment because they have their own drop-in center, not understanding that sometimes LGBTQ youth need to have an escape from the general population for their mental health and well-being. Some of the efforts that we do at Bill Wilson Center, we did a train the trainer effort for Eastside Union School District, where we trained all of the social workers for the entire school district on providing affirmative care for queer and trans youth, and then they took that back and implemented it at all their school sites. We stressed the idea, people talked about signage earlier on the panel, making sure that they understand that not having access to restrooms is a form of bullying for youth. Is there LGBTQ clubs or support groups on campus? Do queer and trans youth see their identities reflected in the curriculum and on their campus and in other campus activities? And so briefly, for the suggestions that I have, because Ash and I are both sharing our time coming from the same agency, I think that it needs to start with educators in the school, because some of these educators are the only role models that youth have, especially foster youth. And so I think that we need to be having extensive trainings for the supporting of queer and trans youth for our educational professionals, and as well as the students themselves. I feel like they should be in trainings together. We did, during one of the surveys that we used for the Train the Trainer for Eastside Union School District, we used some research from GLSEN, which is the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, and they're the nation's leading national education organization working to create safe schools for all. And some of the findings that they found is, compared to LGBTQ students with no supportive school staff, students with many, identified as 11 or more supportive staff at their school, were less likely to feel unsafe, less likely to miss school, they had higher GPAs, and they were less likely to say they might not graduate high school, and felt more connected to their school community. Also, LGBTQ students with a GSA, so a Gender and Sexuality Alliance, or some people call Gay Straight Alliance, at their schools were less likely to feel unsafe at the school and felt more connected to the school and their communities as well. And 75.2% of LGBTQ students in schools with inclusive curriculum said that their peers were accepting of LGBTQ people, compared to the 39.6% of those who said that they didn't have an inclusive curriculum. Also, again, going back to the role model idea, that the educators are the role models, we were stressing in our training that the educators needed to take on bullying head on, so we provided them with a bunch of handouts about how to combat anti-LGBTQ language, such as no homo and other things that are normally said throughout the day that people don't understand, that is very anti-LGBTQ and that is also hate speech. Because I feel like, these youth are picking it up somewhere, and then they're going back and they're growing up, and then they're becoming community members, and then those community members could be the people who lead up to attacking people and, hurting others. So I'm going to give Ash the rest of the time.
Thank you.
Good
Ashton?
afternoon. I'm Ash. I am the health specialist at Bill Wilson Center and work closely with Chris with our LGBTQ drop-in center. And I am going to kind of piggyback off of talking about education, specifically from a personal experience. I'm also a survivor of a hate crime, multiple hate crimes that were never reported. And I think in light of the news currently, it
completely makes sense why I wouldn't have reported it, and I think this is true for most minorities. And so when we are seeing currently a spike in reporting, I think it's because as minority communities, we understand our president is a bully and that we have to come together and speak up because he is not going to for us. So I just wanted to kind of put that spin on it, that maybe it's actually a good thing that we're starting to see some reports. I did want to discuss my experience as a mother. I'm a queer mother of twins who just recently started kindergarten. In the first week of kindergarten, my children came home and told me that only boys marry girls and girls marry boys. I had to pull the car over and have a conversation. My kids have queer mothers. They also have several aunts that are queer with children, so it's not like they live in a heteronormative bubble. They actually have quite the colorful one. And so I started asking questions, and I've actually been in the school because I'm that nosy parent who actually wants to be a part of the classroom. Every book is heteronormative. It's gender specific. There's not really a space even for my kids as they're sitting and learning in curriculum. And that's being reflected on the schoolyard with what those children are hearing at home and coming home. I'm an interfaith leader. I'm often flanked with reverends, and my father is a Sundance chief, and my children are involved in faith communities, and my daughter came home this week to tell me that I was gonna probably go to hell, and I don't think the angels like you anymore, Mommy, because you married other Mommy. So I'm telling you guys this because my children are 5. I now have to deal within my personal home the heteronormative, bad theology that is embedded in our society, the systemic oppression within my home. I am trying to unpack it with 5-year-olds, and that's, anybody have kids? I mean, that's difficult anyways. So like we're dealing with layers. Like, so to me, the only way to really, like, I don't want to have a job in my field. I don't want there to be LGBTQ homeless youth. And the only way to really get ahead of that is in prevention, and it's early prevention. And I'm going to tell you right now that the parents are going to riot, and it's going to be great. They are going to riot. They are going to push back. But, you know, having, you know, books in the school that reflect, you know, different religions and colors and genders and same-sex parents and maybe grandparents as parents. Maybe if I actually got a flyer that didn't say Dear Mom or Dad, that would be great too. I'm just telling you this like from our personal space because this is what I'm dealing with every single day and unpacking it when they get home. That really in order to get ahead of most hate crimes before they get to the point where our youth are homeless and have sought out sex work as feasible ways, but food in their mouth, we really do need to look at curriculum. We need to look at the educators, and we need to look at how we really bring the parents in there to support that unity of diversity that we see in our county. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Next, we have Paula.
Hello. All right.
Survivor.
Good afternoon, Assemblymember Kansen and everyone who is here today. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm a little different from the rest of the panelists in that I am not from a specific organization. I'm more of a freelance anti-bullying activist. My bio's up there, you can read it for yourself, but basically I have been an anti-bullying activist since the year 2011, and during this time I have spoken at churches, high schools and high school clubs, colleges, so many different places. This past summer I spoke at my first conference, which was very exciting, but I'm here today, like I said before, not to represent an organization, but to represent a specific individual who's had very few advocates in her life. This little girl did not have many people to speak up for her. She entered an all-girls private middle and high school in the 6th grade, and she was very naive and innocent and kind of had her head in the clouds, and that made her a perfect target for bullying. She was labeled as gullible, as dumb, and from then on, up to the time she graduated high school, she had been the target of physical bullying. She had been hit even in as early as the 6th grade. She had experienced verbal bullying and vicious rumors behind her back and horrible things said to her and right in her face, including things that she had never experienced before, such as racism and classism. She experienced sexual bullying for 3 years, from 7th grade to 9th grade. She experienced cyberbullying, where people have posted pictures of her and a thread of comments just viciously attacking her. This girl also had someone impersonate her on Facebook, and she didn't know about it because she refused to get a Facebook, just so that people wouldn't be emailing her and messaging her with hate. She was already getting phone calls by that time. She had already gotten phone calls from people in her school, and she didn't know where they were. She didn't know who they were, but they would say things on the phone to her. This girl had been stalked, had dealt with so much. And so I'm coming to you today as a survivor, as someone who I didn't graduate that long ago. This is something that is happening every day, and it is happening now. And so I come to you as a beginning public speaker, really, even though I've done this for a few years, but I'm coming to you with some ideas for how we can combat this issue as a survivor, but also as a researcher at Palo Alto University studying psychology and social action. So if we could hit the next slide. You'll actually see that I'm clearly not the only one. Every 1 out of 3 children experience bullying in North America and Europe. Just North America and Europe alone. This is a pretty high percentage, around 33%. And so in order to talk about how we can combat this issue and how to deal with bullying, we need to talk about where these aggressors, I don't like to call them bullies, where these aggressors are coming from, where they're learning these behaviors, and we also want to talk about who are the most vulnerable to bullying. And this is actually something that my friend posted on Facebook, and I would love to share with educators because I felt it was so true. Students who are loved go to school to learn, but students who are not loved go to school to be loved. And so there's so many factors that could push a student to becoming, I don't like to say victim, I like to say survivor, and also could also push them to become an aggressor. We see that it depends really on the year that you're in. So we see an increase of bullying and peaking in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. And then it kind of levels out during high school and into senior year. So if we want to combat and stop bullying before it hits that peak, we need to start at elementary school, and we need to start with teaching them different conflict resolution strategies and how to deal with anger and their emotions. We have students with different ethnicities at our schools. We find that students of color, particularly the Latinx community, face a lot of discrimination and bullying. Gender, females experience a lot of relational bullying, and disability and mental illness, whether it's physical or whether it's depression or anxiety. Basically anything that deviates you from the norm is what will make you, is what could push someone to, is what can make them vulnerable to being bullied. And for aggressors, they are very likely to become an aggressor if they have experienced bullying in their own home between their parents, or their parents bullying them. or if they are left alone, if they're neglected at home. And so if we go to the next slide, we see that we have so many things we need to address. If we want to address bullying, we need to also address racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, all the isms and the phobias that exist from outside in our world that is penetrating into our schools. And we want to target and help our students, and particularly target our aggressors and our survivors. We need to fix the school bullying climate. We need to work on educating our teachers and educating our administrators how to see a bullying situation and how to appropriately deal with it. We need to introduce them to different lifestyles, different cultures, so that it's not foreign to them. There's so much that we can do, but what I really wanted to highlight for you is that this is a personal issue for me. This is something that I have just recently come out of, and I hope that this district will do something to target the school environment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing a lot of your personal experience. Thank you. Now we'll have two students from our St. Teresa High School. 3. Okay, I didn't see the other one, but please.
Hello. Thank you guys for having us. My name is Sophia. These are my classmates Cynthia and Maria, and we're here representing our school and as students who are actually experiencing this firsthand. We kind of want to address the ignorance that is among the school, among the teachers, among the students, and how we are not informed, and that we need to be more aware of like everything we're going through and people are going through, and we have brought some solutions that we can propose to you guys.
Okay, so one of the solutions we thought was excellent was proposing maybe like ethnic studies classes. A lot of what we see in our curriculum is very Eurocentric, and in doing or in kind of pushing that, I don't want to say agenda, but agenda, we do a very major disservice to our ethnically diverse population. And I want to be able to relate to something. I want to be able to, I just think it'd be easier to focus in class if I were able to relate to something. And, oh God.
Another way that like we thought we could help do this is that Cynthia, I, and another classmate, we actually, our sophomore year, we saw that there wasn't a group for the Latinx community, so we decided to form one. And through this, we wanted to create like a community where our fellow Latinx students could come and feel comfortable and know there's a place for them, because our school is about 40% Latinx students, so we thought that, and there's no union for them, so we thought that if we create this, they have a space where they could be represented and have a voice.
So basically, adding on to what they're saying, I am of Mexican heritage. I didn't actually learn much about my culture until my freshman year, when one of my teachers explained more about it to me. And I think it was kind of sad just thinking about it, because over the years, you do hear like in middle school and everything, they do mention other countries and they do mention what our country has done to other countries, but they kind of, when you read the history books, they more glorify the US, so you don't really hear the entire story. So when I got to my freshman year and I heard all these other stories from like the side of other countries and all that, it was surprising to know all these facts that I never even heard of before, because of the fact that our history books and world history, which we call, which honestly doesn't have to do with the world, it just has to do with the US, basically only talks about the US side and what the US did for themselves and all that. So I think it's a good idea to have ethnic studies so more people can learn more about their culture, and those who don't know about their culture because either their parents haven't explained to them anything, or for other reasons, they should know where their backgrounds and all that, especially because it ties into bullying as to why people are saying what they're saying to them. And I think it's also a good form to show other people who aren't of the same heritage why we have our culture one way or why we do things a certain way than them, so they can be more educated on what we're doing and as to why we're doing it.
Another thing that we'd like to address is not only like the students being more active and aware of what's going on with the bullying, but also the teachers put it into action and put in more effort. We've had teachers make comments like, "Oh, I don't trust Mexicans," and stuff like that. And I think just starting with that, it makes the students think it's okay for them to say remarks like this, just because they have, you know, basically the people they're looking up to in the school environment say these things. So it's not a thing to just train the students, but also the teachers, so that not only that it's right for the teachers to know not to act this way, but so the students feel more comfortable and like they could report it, and they know that like if they report it, like something's gonna be done, and that they're not just wasting their voice, and that they actually have a voice.
Also, I feel that teachers need more training on how to be able to, in a way, support their students. And from personal experience, I can say that up until this year, I had no adult figure on campus that I could look up to. And that all changed when I found our lovely advisor, Mr. Chang. He's back there. Yay, Mr. Chang. And that really affects the way in which I'm able to learn, because if I don't have that support system, I'm not being encouraged to like ask questions and just learn. And so I think that's just a major issue.
Maria, do you have anything else? Go ahead. Okay, on another small change of topic, I also wanted to address the fact of gender-based roles in school, or the way people look at like girls versus boys. So what I've noticed, at least growing up, was when we're growing up, and I've had teachers tell me that, oh, this is what the district wants, this is what the district said they need. They tell us the way we should dress and all that, which kind of relates to what I think it's Cortese was saying earlier about sexual assault. And I think instead of having people tell us what to wear and what not to wear, we should be telling like others, this isn't how you're supposed to be looking at women or at other people, because women obviously aren't the only people who get sexually assaulted. But I see it all over Twitter all the time, but I never see anyone actually addressing anything about it in school. So I feel like it's important for us to be telling others, don't be looking at someone like that. That's not the way you look at people, instead of telling people, don't wear that or don't wear this because of this or that. So.
Right. All right. Thank you very much. I understand your teacher, Jason Chen, and brought his class and entire Latinx Association here, so please stand up, all the Latinx Association members, and be recognized. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. What a dynamic and very diverse group here, and let's give them another good round of applause. I wanted to especially thank those people that have the courage to share their personal experiences with us. So thank you very, very much. I heard a common thread here, you know, with such a diverse panelists, is that we should jointly own the problem. You know, we should realize that attack on one of us is attack on all of us. So I want to thank you very much for this great. And many of you touched about the education part, and I do have a bill, I think, that signed into the law by the governor to require, what initially it was to require every school has a mental health professional, mental health counseling services with a 1 to 200 student ratio. And it got watered down a little bit as the bill moved through to committees and the floor to 1 to 600 students. Finally, we had a bill to require the school to notify their students and their parents at least twice a year of the mental health services in our community. So next year, we'll work with Ash to trying to identify some funding source, then we'll be able to have mental health counseling services in every school, and that will also help with many of the issues that we're addressing today. Ash, you have any questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Assemblymember Chu, and I've known some of you for a number of years. Some of you I'm meeting for the first time, but this was phenomenal. It was very instructive for me, and very powerful as well. And I certainly would love to have Maha the presentation, and I'm going to have my entire staff go through it next week, and because I think the really important information there, just as a base knowledge. I think that everyone that's working in, certainly in my office and hopefully in others, will get that information so they'll have a better understanding. But fantastic presentations. I do want to our high school students here, certainly, if I was your age and presenting here, I'd be a bumbling mess. So I'm very impressed by all of you and your ability to articulate yourselves in a very effective manner. And so kudos to you. And I wanted to mention that we did have a bill that we fully supported. It's our colleague, Senator Jose Medina, AB 2772, AB 2772, so make a note of that, which would have required ethnic studies as a requirement of graduation. Unfortunately, yes, let's applaud that. And then we can say, boo, the governor vetoed it. But the governor vetoed it in his message, and I love our governor. I think he's done some great things. I think this was one I don't agree with him on. And in his message, he says, while I recognize the value of these courses, I'm reluctant to encourage yet another graduation requirement, especially when students are already overburdened by multiple tests and endless hours of homework. I don't agree with him. I think that certainly there are a lot of burdens on our students, but I think that we need to prioritize what's most significant and most important. And I think ethnic studies is critically important, but guaranteed. I've already talked to Senator Medina. It's going to come back next year, and I look forward to reaching out to you, and I know Kansen will help me and make sure that we get you up to Sacramento so you can advocate in Sacramento and lobby that bill when it comes back up against next year. So thank you. Thank you, thank you. I agree with 100% of what all three of you said on all of your comments, and just very proud of all of you. And I went to Oak Grove High School, but go Saints. A couple of things. Paula, very powerful. Thank you, and frankly, it brought up a lot of my own flashbacks of being bullied when I was a kid, and it makes me sad that that students are still going through it, and even in a more hateful and with cyberbullying, just it's a shame. And thank you for having the courage to share your story, so that we can continue to figure out what we need to do a better job, whether it's in school districts, state level, law enforcement, you name it. We need to be protecting our students. We haven't done a good enough job. At least here, hopefully we have the opportunity to do better. And so I'm very grateful for you sharing. And the last thing I want to mention, because we have some great community leaders here to our left that work very well together. And I think we're lucky, certainly being in Santa Clara County, that we do. And Chris and Ash, you mentioned some things that were very, very important that I think allow for opportunity of, again, intersectionality and working together with the LGBTQ community, certainly the pervasiveness of homelessness that initially may result from bullying or being outcast from our family, what have you. It's an epidemic. It's a crisis. And I think that as we talk about the work that we're doing with anti-bullying as it applies to faith, ethnicity, race, and having these powerful leaders here, that we have to make sure that we're working in a very intentional way in combating homophobia and hatred towards the LGBTQ community. I think that there's no doubt that within oftentimes it's coming through the misinterpretation or misapplication of faith that we have the hatred. And I think that we have the opportunity for those of us that understand and work with faith leaders that actually get it, to make sure that we're working as vocally as possible to combat the hatred towards the LGBTQ community, and to be as welcoming and with as open arms as possible, but also to be proactive in making sure that within our own communities, whether it's the South Asian community or being Hindu or the other faiths here, that we are not only seeking out ways to combat the bullying against the specific faiths or ethnicities, but we're using our voice as well to make sure that within our own community that we're very, not just seeking, checking when there's anti-LGBTQ actions or people are verbalizing it, but we need to actually have more proactive programs in our communities. And those are very difficult, conversations to have with all communities. But I can tell you, as an Asian American, and I guess everyone could probably say that about their own community, but there's a lot of homophobia that doesn't get discussed. We don't talk about it, and we have to. As leaders, we have to talk about it as part of the greater conversation as we talk about anti-bullying. So I just want to mention that because, again, thank you for being here, and thank you for the courage of talking about your stories. Chris, that was also very powerful, and I know that all of us bring our own stories, and that's why we're doing this work. And so thank you. Sorry for taking so long, but thank you all so much, and I look forward to continuing to work with all of you.
Thank you, Ash. And as we know, that next year we'll have a new governor, so we can try to build again. All right. And let me yield to the
Thank you.
supervisors.
Supervisor Cortese and I put our heads together, so I just want to do the universal thank you to each and every one of you. And the second thing I wanted to do was just to raise two opportunities. The county will be bringing forward to our board on November the 6th, an increase in funding that we are investing in intimate partner violence. But a subset of that will have a significant investment in prevention. And I think what all of you talked about relative to not trying to prevent one ism over another, but really how we think about this in a more universal way, will be an opportunity for our county to step very big into the prevention environment. And so that's the first thing I wanted to comment on. The second thing I wanted to comment on is this Tuesday our board will be voting on resources for a transgender transitional housing facility that will house, I think, older teens and young adults. And that, so the reason I raise that is that part of the reason that issue came to us was in one of the hearings that Dave and I co-chaired. The community came out and told us what they wanted, and so we're moving in that direction. So I more wanted to say thank you for the information, but also say let's get to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As we're inviting the third panel to come on the dais, I want to take this opportunity to chime in on the comment. I think Maha made the comment and thanked my staff, and Simone to my left, to my right here, and also introduce my Chief of Staff, Annie Fan. Annie Fan in the audience, please stand up and wave. And also Jessica, Howard, and Caitlin from my Capitol office. Where are you? Jessica, okay, Howard, Caitlin, and also my district director, Anurag. I know Anurag is around here. Anurag, wave. And Nancy Lee, and Simone, and Matthew. Matthew is over there, manning the presentation. So we have the third panel, the third panelist seated. I feel we're running a little bit late, so please bear with us. And we will start with the Superintendent of Milpitas Unified School District, Cheryl Jordan. Cheryl, the floor is yours.
Well, good evening, and I would like to thank you all for having this opportunity for us to come together and talk about the hurt that that many of us in our communities and across the nation feel, especially in these recent times. I think that in order for us to make changes, it's important to talk about it and to take a risk. And I am greatly humbled by all of those who spoke before me. And as a representative of education and educators, for all of those who have experienced wrongs, I would like to personally apologize on behalf of those of us who are supposed to be protecting and providing you with safe environments in which to learn. And with the great task ahead of us, we do need to continue to do all we can so that our students and our employees can come and learn and work in safe environments. And really, our schools are microcosms of our communities and consequently of the nation. And so what I've been trying to work on with my team is building a culture of we across our district and across our city of Milpitas. And I've been reaching out to different groups. And last week, I had the good fortune to meet with a group called the Muslim Cultural Proficiency Exchange. And a young man, Ibrahim Abiez, shared with me a program that I went to institute in my school district called We the Peace. And he explained that what this is a very simple activity where student leaders meet with other students once a week, just simply to get to know one another. Because what they found in their studies of racism and terrorism is that people who are recruited into groups that perpetuate hate crime, it's typically because they need to have a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, and a sense of value. So with We the Peace, what that will do is provide students with an opportunity to have a purposeful excuse to go meet with another student, introduce themselves, talk a little bit about who they are, and then share that with the greater community and create a heat map across the nation which will show this peace spreading. So that's one initiative that we want to implement. Something else that's happening in our schools, particularly at Calaveras Hills High School, is something called the Safe Schools Ambassadors Program. And that, too, I think we have Ann here from Project Cornerstone. I think that program is very exciting because it encompasses a lot of practices that we have heard about, such as restorative justice. It encompasses the 40 developmental assets, and boiling it down into a nutshell, what it does is it provides for the students a sense of family, again, a sense of purpose. It helps them to take ownership of the environment. It teaches them to notice the microaggressions. It teaches them strategies on what to do when they notice that. And it's targeting students who have influence over others, and they become the ambassadors. And so, for example, what the students shared with me yesterday is that for now on, when they notice that there's somebody who's being put down or somebody who's being ridiculed for the way he looks or thinks or acts, that they know that they have tools to either distract, to change the subject, to, as they said, straight up be direct and point out what is the wrong, and also, if necessary, go to authority. And at the same time, it makes our teachers aware of what they need to look for in the classroom, because, as was pointed out, many times they don't notice it. And so together, the ambassadors and the educators ultimately change the school climate, and their research demonstrates that suspensions decreased by about 30% after the first year of implementation. And a big reason for that is that students feel connected, they feel that they're valued, and they feel that their dignity is intact, and they don't have to worry about other students destroying it. Some of the other things that we have going across our district are positive behavior and intervention strategies, and Soul Shop, and Peace Builders, and Acts of Respect campaign. And all of those, they all center on, again, helping a student to feel valued, to feel respected, to feel that they can stand up for one another. Some of the other aspects, as was mentioned also by previous panels, is the importance of ethnocentric studies. And last year I told my Latino and or Latinx and my African ancestry students that by 2021 we will have an ethnic studies program in our school district, because it's essential that students have an opportunity to learn about who they are. This summer, in my welcome back with all of our staff, I talked to them about how in our history books, it is the history of those who have traditionally been in power, and that we needed to be mindful of that. And in this next history adoption, we will make sure that we select those books which value our Hindu Americans, for example, our students of African ancestry, Muslims, so that our students can feel that they see themselves, and they see themselves not as oppressed people, but as people who rise up. Another example of something that we're doing beginning in January is we're having the Browder Family Initiative, so that our students of African ancestry and their parents can see how they connect to each other, and be proud of where they came from, and be proud and share that with others in our school district going forward. And I see I only have about 30 seconds left. And I think the importance of all of this is that adults, as my students pointed out to me yesterday, adults too are bullies. Adults perpetuate it. And in order for us to really truly create a community and a nation where people are valued for who they are, we do need to start with our students. And every step counts, and I know that we have before us an opportunity to really make great change. So thank you again for having us here.
Thank you. And Wayne.
Thank you for having me here. I'm going to speak to what I'm not on. Try this one. This one on? Okay. I'll lean in this way. I'm really going to speak about what we're doing in Santa Clara at the elementary level today, because that's what I have the most knowledge of in our district. Kind of one of the things that really sets the tone as an elementary principal is Todd Whitaker says when the principal sneezes, the whole school catches a cold, and that's really true. As the instructional leader of his site, our elementary principals have a real responsibility to bring a positive attitude and help lead a positive climate. In Santa Clara right now at elementary schools, we're starting to work on a multi-tiered system of support, looking at behavior, social and emotional, as well as academics, and part of our process. And in the last few years, we've really started working on positive behavior support, intervention support, PBIS, and I want to speak a little bit to that, because part of what I think I'm hearing is a lot of times we forget that kids need to be taught things as early as elementary school. And so in our schools, in our elementary schools, we're looking at what does it look like to be, in our school we chose ROAR, we're the Bobcat, so we roar. So what does that mean to be respectful, have an outstanding attitude, always be safe and responsible? And throughout all of our teaching of our guidelines, we have lesson plans that the teachers all use in terms of what does it look like to be respectful with people, what does it look like to be safe in the classroom, on the playground, in the cafeteria, in line. How do we act? How do we treat each other? And then we try to use common language. So if we see someone that's not doing the right thing, is that respectful? Are you being safe? Are you showing an outstanding attitude? How can you be responsible? And by doing that to the students, they learn that language with us, and that's really an important thing. And also one of the other pieces that we're working on too is a system of monitoring students. So how do we track the data? How do we find out what needs to happen? So our leadership teams used to primarily do academics. So let's look at when we have a professional learning community meeting and we get together and we look at the data, we say, okay, academically, how are these kids doing? But we're recognizing that that's not the only thing that matters. So now we're also tracking behavioral data. So are we having problems in the classroom? And what is it? So we have a tool. We're looking at majors and minors and what kinds of things are we seeing? My leadership team, when we meet twice a month now, one of the things we do is look at the data of behavior. Is there a booster that we need to do? Is there an area that we need to be concerned about? And if kids keep popping up on that radar, we have a secondary committee. It's our wellness team. And you talked about marriage family therapists. We have one at our site now 2 days a week. And it's amazing to have a licensed marriage family therapist on staff that works with students and families and connects them to like Bill Wilson or whatever they need on the outside. We also have a counseling intern. And that's a real positive also, depending on the intern that we have. And so it would be nice if they were full-time marriage family therapists. I know interns need practice too, but some of our interns are really better skilled and to help with kids than others are. And through that work of our wellness teams, so we can look at other options. So like we have a check-in, check-out option. So we have a person in the morning that meets a child at school and says, how many points can you earn today for different sets of your day? And then the teacher checks in with that child all day long to see if they're making those points. And at the end of the day, we check out with that child. How'd you do today? Oh, you didn't make it, too bad. Tomorrow's a better day, you can do it. Or congratulations, you made it, way to go. And then you can get to the prize box because, you know, elementary kids like rewards, just like we all do. And so having those rewards for kids that they like are real positive. So those are kinds of things that come out of the wellness committee, and we track the kids in that. Are the supports that we're adding in for the student helping? Is it going to make a difference for that child? Are they meeting their goal every day? Are we seeing better behavior? And then also, is there someone that we're seeing that's popping up from the teachers that can let us know and say, hey, this child's not doing well, they're coming to school late. We can bring them up in our wellness team also, and our marriage family therapist can reach out to the families. And what I really appreciate about that is it's confidential. So they don't come back and tell me or the teacher that there's a problem. They handle it. But if there's something we can do as a school to support them, then we can do that as well. So over the past really 4 years as we've been working through this process, I've seen some real great improvement in terms of the common language, in terms of how kids act and interact with each other. I had one of Assemblymember Chu's staff members come walk my school with me, and I got to show off what I felt like was a terrific climate. We're a very diverse school, an extremely diverse school, and I feel really good every day about going there because it's absolutely a fantastic place to be. And then the final thing I want to add when we talk about teacher training is a lot of times teachers don't know. So, principals don't know. And we don't always know how to respond and do things. And one of the things that I've really been working on in terms of consequences and discipline is restorative practices, trying to figure out what exactly happened in the moment. Is this a conflict? Is this ongoing bullying? How can we solve to this problem so that that child can get back in the classroom and be successful in the classroom? Because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And we also created a list of supports that teachers can have. So if a child's having trouble, whether it's an academic or a behavioral area, where can they go to get support? What are some ideas we can use? Who do they talk to as teachers? So not only do we want to give the students and the parents things, we also want to give our teachers resources as well. Because a lot of times, a long time ago, when I first began teaching, I had a very wise person tell me this. Kids, and I will say this about adults too, do things for one or two reasons. Either they don't know or they don't want to. And we're educators. Our job is to teach them and teach them and teach them and teach them again. But if they don't want to, there's consequences. So as we look at the situation and what we're dealing with, is it because they don't know or because they don't want to? And then how do we go about teaching and educating, whether it's teachers, whether it's students, administrators, whoever it is we're working at, to try to change and make our cultures better at school? Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I also want to publicly congratulate you for receiving the Positive Behavior Intervention and Support Coalition Silver Award. So congratulations. Thank you very much for being able to accomplish so much with very limited resources. It really encouraged me to carry the bill again next year to make sure that every school has counseling services, mental health services. So thank you very much. And we'll go to Matt Campbell from our Fremont Unified School District.
Hello, good
Welcome.
evening. Thank you.
Assemblymember Chu, thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak on this very important topic. My name is Matt Campbell, and I'm the Director of Student Support Services, and on behalf of our Superintendent, Dr. Kim Wallace, we are honored to present to you what we do in the school district. I wanted to take a different approach in terms of what we do. I think that one of the things that I've heard the panelists in one of the items that we wanted to focus on in Fremont. Fremont is a very large school district. We have 42 schools, almost 36,000 students, and so it's a very, very diverse place. One of the challenges that we had is in terms of when students reported bullying. One of my first responsibility when I took over was to try to create a system in terms of to unify the district in terms of as a common response. And so what I'd like to do is, if possible, I know that I've been working with this gentleman over here, we created a response report, and I think what's important about this, I'm really, really proud of what we've done, is because regardless of what school a student reports bullying, the response is going to be the same. And so what you can see right here is that we've spent a lot of time developing this system and communicating and providing professional development. So when we talk about school safety, when we talk about students being safe, I think that one of the important things is that when bullying is reported, when somebody has the courage to come forward and report it, then what happens? I can tell you this as a parent, I experienced this, that my own son experienced some bullying, and I was shocked at the lack of response in terms of what came back to me. So I can tell you emphatically that in Fremont, if a student or a child or a parent reports bullying, this is how we are going to, this is our process and in terms of what we do. So what you see in front of you is our harassment, bullying, summary response report. And as you can see every school site. And so then every administrator has the link to this specific form. So then if a child comes forward, a parent comes forward and reports bullying, then the administrator knows that within 24 hours they have to initiate a report, initiate the investigation. So you can see there's a drop-down menu, so at the top, so there's all schools that are listed there. And that's purposeful because at the end of every semester, I give a report to every administrator from their particular school site, so then they can go back and analyze the data. So there's the site administrator who's doing the investigation, the date of the incident, the time of the incident, and the name of the complainant. We went round and round about, do we call them the alleged victim, but we decided to go with the name of the person that's filing the complaint, the ID number, and then the grade level of the complaint. And then when you keep on going further up, so then you have information about the respondent. The respondent is the person that is responding to the allegation. And so then what is the grade level of the respondent? And so if you keep on going, then we can have some comparison data. So as you can see, there's the summary of the alleged incident. And so then we have trained our administrators on, and they're the professionals, and so they conduct the investigation. They're the one that compile the notes, have the conversations. And they know that they have to make a determination. Was this bullying incident based on a protected class? And if the answer is yes, then down below those are the federal protected classes. And then they just check the box. And again, that's really, really important for us to know is who in our district is on the receiving end of being bullied. If the answer is yes, then the principals know that the parent receives our UCP, or Uniform Complaint Process, and because the parents have the right, if they want to file a uniform complaint if there is a bullying incident based on a protected class. So then at the end of their investigation, they need to make a determination based on the reported incident and what they could find out through their investigative findings. Is it yes or no? And they, that determination. So regardless of whether or not it's yes or no, is what I am really proud about, and what our administrators do is that if you keep on strolling, then our administrators develop an action plan. They develop an action plan to protect, to address the bullying. And so there is a list of interventions what the school has at their disposal, that they can select any or all that apply, what they can implement at their school site. And so then you can see a long list. If you keep on going and strolling, the next one, it relates to the action plan. They can take kind of a step back and kind of take more of a macro view in terms of, is there something going on in the environment that I need to pay attention to? And so this is what they can do from a school site. And so if you keep on scrolling, so what is the action steps that you took as an administrator to prevent the bullying? And then you can see right there that there's, again, a variety of interventions that administrators can put into place to prevent the bullying. If you keep on going, so how do we remedy the effects of the harassment or the bullying on the complainant or the student that has been on the receiving end of bullying? And so you can see right there, that first bullet right there is restorative conversation. We're implementing restorative practices for the first time in our school district at every secondary level. And so then you can see we can provide resources to our cost team and also just counseling services. The other thing that's really important is that we're educators, and the gentleman to my right just talked about, we have to teach people behavior. So one last thing, if you keep on scrolling, this is the action plan to address the actions of the respondent. And so we call them corrective actions. And so again, there's a long list of interventions that administrators can have at their disposal to address the actions of the respondent. You know what, we tried to do it from the most restorative to probably the most punitive, and so at the bottom, at the very end is, if it happens to come to that, either a suspension or expulsion. And then down at the very bottom, this is the part that I like, is that, of course, they're going to submit the form to me, and then I look at each one of them. But I think that the important piece and missing piece of this, and some students have already talked about it, is when students report something, like sometimes they don't hear anything, but in our district they do. They hear back, because there's a hot link, call it a hot link for lack of a better term. The admin then submits a letter to the parent, and it lists on there the actions that the administrator took during the investigation. So I'm really proud of the work, and I can tell you that, in a big diverse district, our administrators deal with a lot, and this particular process, we engaged in a lot of professional development for our administrators, and more importantly, we reached out the professional development to our staff, and so all of our teachers have an awareness in terms of what bullying is, how to investigate it, if a student approaches them, then how they should respond to it. So I know I'm running out of time, but that's how we deal with student safety, one of the ways in Fremont.
Thank you very much. Kenya, you're on.
Good evening. My name is Kenya Edison. I'm the Director of Student Services for Eastside Union High School District. I'm here representing our district at the request of my superintendent, Chris Funk, and I'm excited to be here. I will, like my colleague Matt, take a different approach and spill in how I present the information, and I will also address what our approach is as a district. But I first want to caution us as we begin to have the conversation around bullying, that we understand what bullying really is, and that we don't overgeneralize the use of the word, and understanding that any action that creates an unsafe environment for students or staff, and by safety, I mean physically, mentally, emotionally, or socially unsafe, requires an action. But for the sake of when I speak tonight, I'm using the definitions, that have been defined by Chavez, who has 40 years as an international specialist and expert in bullying intervention and research, as well as the Ed Code. So for common language and understanding, Chavez describes bullying as an unwanted negative act that's displayed as a pattern of behaviors over time and involves an imbalance of power and strength. My colleague Cheryl, when she was speaking, she stated that bullying is not just among students. So it's important for us to understand having any type of power or any type of strength that is above who you're targeting, whether you're an adult or a student, can be classified as bullying by that definition. Also, for clarity, Ed Code has a very clear definition. As educators, we're governed by it, right? We don't come in with I think, I hope, I feel. We use the Ed Code to govern the work that we're doing. And so Ed Code is clear that bullying is a severe and pervasive physical or verbal act, included in writing, that includes the components of harassment, and that includes sexual harassment as well as hate actions. It also has at least one of 4 negative impacts, which is the fear of harm to a person or self, the experience of substantially detrimental effect on physical or mental health, interference with a student, his or her academic performance, and then an interference with his or her ability to participate in any services or activities or privileges provided by the school. I'm not saying that anything that doesn't meet this threshold is not relevant. I'm just saying we have loosely used the word bullying sometimes for just bad choices on kids' parts, and labels and words matter. Our young people are labeled galore. I am adverse to the term at risk because that puts responsibility on students. Students have factors in their life that they have to overcome. So as we use the terms bullying, I just want to be really clear. It is necessary to always respond to any negative act, but when we use the term bullying, there's some additional responsibilities and requirements that we should be in tune to. As a district, we are trying to ensure that we are consistent and uniform across our entire district to ensure that students are welcomed as they are, that they have the supports they need to be healthy and to thrive, that adults respond appropriately when a need presents itself, and that they're able to be extremely successful in all of their ventures. And I say that to say, in our district, we are a high school only district, so we have 16 schools, that's 11 comprehensive, 1 alternative, 1 charter, and 3 small but necessaries, and we have about 23,000 students. So to ensure that we're having a consistent common message, it is important that there is some oversight to this. I commend Matt on his Google Doc Drive because that's an amazing way to ensure that there's consistency and that everyone has been afforded the same opportunity. In our district, when an administrator is made aware of a bullying, a report of bullying, the first guidance that they receive is to first check in with the person who's doing the reporting to ensure that they feel that they're in a safe space, and to refer to any immediate services to ensure that they're physically, mentally, socially, and emotionally healthy. As they're doing that, the next step is to do a separate and thorough investigation. Part of the investigation piece is also education. Sometimes we have to educate those along the way on words that are being used, actions, how they were perceived, so it's important for them to conduct that. If an issue at the beginning of the investigation is feared to also involve a protected class, in our district we now have a position that's the Director of Equity, Inclusiveness, and Diversity, and they respond to any report of bullying or harassment that is towards a protected class. Parents do not have to request that. That is an automatic UCP investigation that happens tandem at the same time that the school site is investigating the issue. Giving the facts and what the investigation turns over, the next step is to make decisions on appropriate responses. And the responses, like was previously stated, isn't just for the student who is reported to have committed the behaviors, but it's a response on any health supports, interventions, to teach behaviors, not only to punish them, to heal relationships and hold each other accountable. We also ensure that there's follow-up so that we can make sure that that young people learn. As a community, I was asked to address as a community, how can we work to address bias-race bullying? I have to say we have to understand that we have a responsibility of appropriately supporting students who are not only the subject of what may be bullying, but who are accused of bullying. As a community, we have to move beyond just ensuring our kids are college and career ready, but also make them community ready. We're not pushing out grades into the communities, we're pushing out human beings. This includes teaching and supporting improvement on social emotional core competencies of self-awareness, self-management, relationship skills, social awareness, as well as responsible decision-making. Although teaching these competencies is naturally embedded in parenting, I think it's important as a village, we all invest in ensuring that those core competencies are at the forefront of any of our investments, not only time, but our money. Some students need more help to develop those competencies. For me, I call them our ELKs. Those are our extra love kids. Those are kids who have not been able to gain those competencies in a tier 1 format, and they need some one-on-one attention to improve their behaviors. We cannot vote kids off the island for making bad choices, but we can ensure that we teach appropriate behaviors as well as holding them accountable. As a community approach, it would be that we send a clear message that behaviors are unwanted, not individual students. Bullying is a complex issue. It requires a complex response. The response has to include being age appropriate. We cannot police, arrest, press charges out of this work. This is work we have to get in the forefront of. We have to be working on prevention as well as intervention at the same exact time. In short, I just say, as we build capacity in our young people, they will lead the way. And I have to apologize for just the community and to the community in general on behalf of the lack of leadership we have in this country right now, because it is perpetuating the very topic that we're sitting here talking about tonight.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Last but not least, we have the Ann from the Project Cornerstone.
Thank you so much, and it's an honor to be here on this panel alongside these educators that are clearly understanding the importance of school climate and educating the whole child. Project Cornerstone is part of the YMCA of Silicon Valley, and we work alongside schools, providing them with tools that will help in the realm of prevention. And I think we've heard that theme over and over again with every speaker that we've heard this afternoon, that prevention is critical. Creating climates that are welcoming, inclusive, where children feel valued, respected, and known is really important. So as Project Cornerstone has evolved over the last 20 years, our partnerships with schools have expanded to over 200 schools from Redwood City to Gilroy. And our prevention efforts are attempt to include 3 parts of the school community. We try to include the staff and the administrators. We try to include the students because they are critical. And we also try to include the parents. Most of our efforts have been targeting towards earlier education, so working in preschool and elementary and into the middle school years. We've created a curriculum that uses children's books that are brought into the classroom every month. And we have trained over 4,500 parents to bring those books into elementary pre-K classrooms, and they're leading lessons from the books that are about empathy, about conflict resolution, about problem solving, about how do you stand up and take action, and how do you become an upstander instead of a bystander in a bullying situation. The curriculum is available not only in English but also in Spanish, so that parents who are monolingual can be engaged and involved and connected in their children's school in these efforts. So the parents who are volunteering with us are enhancing the caring school climate that the staff and administrators are creating, and they're critical because they're on the front line. And the students are really having a chance through the lessons to put into practice, I'm glad you mentioned Chavez, some great bullying prevention research, that we can't expect kids or adults to just instinctively know how to react and respond and how to do the right thing. They need a chance to be informed, taught, and then to practice through role plays and through different activities. So by embedding that into our lessons, then the kids are building a vocabulary and a skill set that the teachers are reinforcing, that out on the playground it's being reinforced. And by having parents engaged in teaching the lessons, then it's also being brought back into the home environment as well. We also have another component called Expect Respect. Kids need a chance to identify and address, and we heard eloquently from the youth who were sitting in these very seats. They're the ones who are experiencing it every day on the front line. So for them to be able to have a safe place to articulate what is happening, and then how could they help lead the change so that it could be different. So our Expect Respect program takes within a school 40 or 50 key influencers of the student population, leads them through a workshop where they're identifying what is happening on their campus. They are then taught some strategies, and they develop an action plan, which is then carried out over the rest of the school year with the support of school staff as well as with the support of parents in the community. And those leadership skills are so important, and teaching those social and emotional skills at an early age are so important. I love the example from Los Gatos High School, the curriculum they were using from EPIC, of how to recognize, interrupt, and repair microaggressions. Having the courage to do that is not something that a high school student is just instinctively going to know. But if they have been learning the tools and the vocabulary to recognize, interrupt, and address from the age of 5 all the way until they're in high school, they're much more likely to be able to respond appropriately. The parent education that we do is not just contained to the parents who are active volunteers. We also do one-shot type parent workshops, but we also have a 6-week series where we help parents go much more deeply into how they are dealing with their own children, as well as all kids are our kids kind of an attitude, because it really does take a village. And then the staff are so critical for the success of what the school climate is. And I'm really proud of all the work that's happened in Santa Clara County and up into San Mateo County, where we work as well, that I do feel that we have a lot of wonderful leaders who recognize the importance of this work. So I want to share with you one of the sort of long-term effects, I believe, of the work of Project Cornerstone, and I was reminded of it when the district attorneys were talking. About 3 years ago, there was an incident at Lincoln High School where students had chosen to create an Instagram account that included a lot of sexting. The bright spot of that story is that the students were the ones who shut it down, not the administrators. The students decided that it was not, this is not their identity, this is not who they are as a student community. And Lincoln High School, we have a critical mass of elementary and middle schools feeding into Lincoln that are Project Cornerstone partner schools. And that's really the incremental approach to creating social change, I believe, is that we've got to start young and then have these environments that are reinforcing, reinforcing, and teaching. So, Assemblymember Chu, you asked the question, sort of, what should you be teaching your grandchild? Well, start now. Work on teaching those skills of empathy, how to really understand and express the feelings that they're having, understand what conflict looks like, and understand some of the skills of how to address and deal with conflict. And then that really critical message of how can we as adults and how can they as youth shift from being a bystander when they see things that are happening in the world and ultimately becoming an upstander. And I'll just close by saying that in these days of so much darkness and negative leadership at a national level, there are so many bright spots in our community that give me great hope. And I really do believe this next generation of youth are going to make a tremendous difference for our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It really gives me a great hope to know that Project Cornerstone has flourished to so many different schools. I was on the YMCA Metro Board. Right now we call it YMCA Silicon Valley. The old name was YMCA Metro Board. I was on the board when we approved taking on this Project Cornerstone to
That was back in 1999, early 2000s, and now we're reaching over 86,000 youth in our community.
It was almost, what, 20 years ago, huh?
Yep, thank you.
Wow. Okay, time flies. But thank you very much. I want to also thank those people in the audience that wanted to address to this panel, and also recognize, frankly, McKinley School Board member Maimona Berta is also with us today, so thank you for your patience, and I will just open for public comments, and anybody wanted to come and address us, please feel free to come up to the podium. And Supervisor.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I want to thank this panel and the previous panel for your preparedness. We sit here as supervisors, county supervisors, in a lot of committees and hearings, and it is seldom that we have presenters that are this prepared across the board. So thank you for that, because that really makes every moment of a hearing like this worthwhile for us, notwithstanding the very severity of the issue itself. I do want to say on the public education side, for the benefit of our state assembly member as well, that I know with Milpitas is one of the 11, I'm not sure if it's 11 or 13 now, but districts who have schooling services through the county, which does a lot of what Mr. Leach was talking about by putting county involvement, and actually some of what you're talking about with your legislation in terms of putting clinical folks and access right on campuses. But there's over $38 million a year invested by the county in the program, thanks to the Mental Health Services Act. And I would just say, if you're looking for the potential earmarking of money that isn't necessarily new money, Assembly Member, perhaps legislation that would either reward districts or put a premium on using MHSA money, state money that's already made available to the very issue that you're bringing up, clinical help in schools and the kind of things that we heard today. So you obviously invited in the best of the best, people who are, already committed to that. I will say not everyone is. We have school districts, as well-intentioned as they are, that are still kind of oblivious to what resources there are or haven't implemented them as well. That's always been an issue. We're not going to have perfection at any point. But what we're hearing from the students and others, including the folks from the first panel, is that despite our best efforts, we're up against it. We're up against it. Part of it is climate. Part of it's what we're hearing. What's being caused at the highest levels of government. But we can't give up. And the point is that we have tremendous availability of local resources and to some extent state resources if they're focused into this area. I thought the profound comment by one of the students, one of the most profound comments was, stop worrying about what we're wearing and start worrying about what people are saying about what we're wearing. And it's just the difference in focus. It doesn't require more money to do that. It requires a culture change. So thank you so much. I'll be here. Supervisor Chavez had to leave for a wedding, so she had no choice but to leave. But I'll stay here to hear the rest of the public comment. But I want to thank you now one more time for convening this hearing here in Santa Clara County.
Thank you, Supervisor, for working with us. And there's actually a card, for people that wanted to address this panel. And first, I will call in Afia Lake, who's a PTA Council President. Afia, please come forward. I think the microphone's up. Are they on?
My name is Afia. Hi, my name is Afia. I'm here as a parent. I'm a parent of 3 children. But I would like to say that for me, each and every child in California is important. They're all so innocent. I don't think that the bullying is something that is engraved in them. They go through a lot of emotions. And there was a colleague who was talking to me at my office, and we were discussing about the colors in life. And there's a box of colors. Everybody has a different box of colors, and everybody is, some has 4, some has 8, some has 16, some has 32. So the only thing that we need to say as to prevent the hate crimes is making children understand the importance of love, empathy, compassion, and respect. All these 4 things are really important. And there are 2 sources, parents and teachers, both. They play a very important role in a child's life. This is if at all we educate the parents, we educate the teachers, our future is going to be bright. These children They are our future. We are already saying what's happening. I mean, I shouldn't say this, but even President of America is a bully right now. And what kind of role model is he? And we do want our children. These children are gonna be our presidents. They are gonna be our future. Doctors, engineers, parents, we need to educate them in every way possible. There need to be some books right in from their born. They're innocent, they're meek, they're meek. When we start reading some books to them, right from the birth, the parents need to educate the children to have love and respect for each and every gender, religion, race, ethnicity. These are just my 2 cents, and I believe that as a parent, I would like to give that to my child, and if at all I get a chance, I would, as a PT, as a volunteer, I'm trying to do whatever I can. I'm trying to be a role model for my child, and I would like teachers and parents to educate their students and their children in the same way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to, I'll call Jasrinda Sohal, Bay Area Cultural and Sports Association.
Thank you. First, I want to thank you, Assemblymember Kansen Chu, for this invitation to this very important meeting and very important topic, and also want to thank you, Supervisor Dave Cortese, for co-hosting. Earlier, Assemblymember Clara has said that, San Jose PD does, by the way, I'm from Sikh community. Assemblyman Clara has said that, San Jose does a good job going to our temple, which is known as the Gurdwara. The way that came about is several years ago, my son was going through the police academy, and one of the diversity training lieutenant was teaching the cohort and said, hey, on Murillo and Quimby, there's also Islamic mosque. So my son corrected him and said, no, hey, we're from India, and we're Sikhs, and it's called Gurdwara. He came home, told me about it, and we felt that there was an opportunity for us to connect with Academy, and which we did, and ever since then, every cohorts that graduate, we bring them to the Sikh Gurdwara. We give them 1 hour presentation on Sikhs in America and on Sikhism. The reason I'm telling you that story is that I think you heard from a lot of the audience and one of our speakers that there's a lot of us that speak from a strength base and don't want to be the victims and want to do something about it. Whether it was the earlier presenter, interpret, or other in the community, but we can't do this alone. And we appreciate that you're having this meeting here, and we need help from you. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. And next, I would like to invite Maimona Berta. She's a Franklin Mechanic School Board member.
Good evening. My name is Maimona Afzal-Berta. I'm a special education teacher and a governing board member in San Jose. And I want to share an experience because it relates to the exact topic that we're covering today and kind of how it's shaped the trajectory of the work that I've been able to work with my community to do. On September 11th, 2017, just over a year ago, I arrived to find my classroom of 5 years vandalized with hateful words associating me with terrorism. I was targeted because of the scarf, the hijab I choose to wear around my head as a practice of my religious belief. It is the same belief that calls upon me as a Muslim to interact with individuals like my students and their families in the most kind, compassionate, and peaceful manner. Last year in total, we experienced 15 incidents of targeted hate at my school site. I cannot describe how profoundly traumatic it is to be violated in a place I consider home. It is important for you to know that I grew up in East San Jose and continue to teach in the same community down the street from my childhood home. Never before had I experienced hate like this. As a community, it was up to us to stand together and respond to hate, and we launched project-based learning units aligned with state standards to explore stereotypes and misconceptions on various groups, and actually worked with ING to do that work. We worked with our district, invited the community at large, and had our entire staff engaged in diversity training. As a teacher, it's critical for us to continue having these important conversations to support those who continue to be impacted by hate. And we need to take collective action and proactive action to make sure we're supporting teachers like myself on the ground, because when these incidents happen, and I see them happen in classrooms each and every single day, we need our teachers to be prepared on how to respond and prevent them from happening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And next one, I don't think I have the card, but please come up to the podium. Tina Rosario. All right, got it. No. Sorry.
Hi, thank you. I love this topic. One being that I was actually a bully in middle school and high school. I did make people carry guns and knives. I was very mean. And so now I have the opportunity. I just ended my contract here in the county of Santa Clara, which I'm very, very sad about as a prevention specialist. As you see, this binder is filled with students. This is just one, from 6th grade to college-age students that loved what I came in to teach, a 10-week program. And I'm just heartbroken that it stopped, because I taught on how to avoid being bullied and how to avoid bullying, because I've been there. Hurt people, so I was able to educate them. And so I'm very sad that this contract ended. I can't tell you how hurtful. These kids cried when they found out that I would no longer be coming into the schools. Before my contract ended, I was in 99 schools a session for 10 weeks through all of Santa Clara County. I want to share with you a poem that one of my students wrote that I read to every single class that I was in. It says, anti-bullying poem. Don't be a bully and roll the wrong dice. Being mean is not very nice. If you're a bully, clean up your act. You don't want to be someone that stabs you in the back. What are you doing to your life? You'd be much happier if you were just nice. Stop being cruel to people that are kind. Open your eyes and start being wise. You want to be satisfied with your actions. People can have extremely sad reactions. Stop hurting people, it isn't smart. Fix this now before you're left in the dark. And ending, I do have to tell you, I've spent most of my young life actually teaching and having to go back and right my wrongs. And I tell you, the impression that I left on a lot of people were not good. So thank you for addressing this issue. It's very, very vital in this community. I'm an advocate. I go in with parents to help diffuse bullying, because schools and in this valley, they do not know how to handle it. And getting together and actually meeting with the families and the school board, it's a win-win situation. Without it, it continues, and it continuously propels. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your service. Next, we'll have Tina Rosario.
Oh, that was me.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right, you got Teresa Hernandez.
Hello. I've had the privilege of knowing both Kansen Chu and Dave Cortese and his wife, Patty Cortese, for many, many years. I am a teacher in Santa Clara Unified School District, but I'm also co-founder of Padres Unidos California. I reached out both to Patty Cortese, Dave Cortese, Kansen Chu, and so many people I could reach out to years ago when my own son was so severely a victim of hate crimes, assaults, bullying, where he had been hospitalized on more than one occasion, and also hospitalized away from schools. So I know that your hearts are in the right places. I do feel that our district is moving in the right direction, Santa Clara. We do attend restorative justice and PBIS, as Wayne said, and Project Cornerstone. At our own school in Alviso, we have mental health counselors. I am actively involved in the ethnic studies, and I'm glad that Ash Carla is going to support that next time around. I especially want to thank Dave Cortese for having the educational bus tours to Sacramento, because you empower the youth to have a voice, and then assemblymen like you that we have in our Santa Clara County, you really listen to them, and it makes all the difference. And for Dave, just let Patty know, my daughter graduated in community studies, Mia Hernandez from UC Santa Cruz, and Patty made that difference as a mentor. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. And next one, we have Sally Horner from CARE.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sally Horna, and I'm a legal fellow with the Council on American Islamic Relations for the San Francisco Bay Area office, also known as CARE. We are the largest American Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization in the United States. We have 35 offices across the nation, and we serve thousands of individuals experiencing discrimination each year. I just want to bring to light 3 projects that we are working with to address school bullying. So the first one is the school bullying survey. And every 2 years, as someone from ING mentioned, we release CARE California releases a school bullying report, which details the type and the frequency of bullying and harassment that American Muslim students experience in public schools. The survey asks students about their school environment and whether they have experienced or witnessed school bullying on their campus. Secondly, along with that survey, we are also conducting Know Your Rights presentations with students. The presentation focuses on what bullying looks like, what students do, what students should and should not do, and what laws protect them. This presentation is applicable to all students, not just Muslim students, and so if you think this information would be valuable to you and your organizations, please let me know, and we're happy to coordinate that with your school or organization. And finally, we do have our Educator's Guide. This CARE California prepared an Educator's Guide to Islamic practices and the religious practices, which is intended as a source of information on Islam and Muslims, kind of like a Muslim 101, in terms of how to understand and support Muslim students and make those accommodations to make sure that they feel included, because sometimes the source of the bullying can stem from the teachers if they don't understand or know how to assist students. So these will be available in the resource table behind me, so please feel free to pick one up, and hopefully this can be something we can work with to help eradicate school bullying. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, CARE does provide a lot of services and information to our community. And last but not least is Teresa Castellano. She is also served on the San Jose Unified School District, or board trustee.
Yes.
All right, Trustee
Hi,
Castellano.
Teresa Castellanos. I commend the fact that you held this hearing. I think it's really important. I think that we are 22 years ahead of the demographic shift than the rest of the country, so there are things that we know as a state, but I don't think that we're immune from all the anti-immigrant, anti-woman, anti-LGBT, anti-African American, anti-working class rhetoric that's happening nationwide. And so I think we still have to do our work. And listening to the students, they filled me with hope, because I think that to a degree our kids are smarter than the adults at this point in a lot of areas. And it also filled my heart with hope to hear our school staff talk about what is being done. But I also want to frame it in the space that we are living something we have never lived before, that I think that we have to do more than what we are currently doing. I completely agreed with the recommendations that the young people had about ethnic studies, about understanding each other, about being able to talk about things. And I think that we do have to get some kind of statewide documenting, and with the variety of things, because I think sometimes school districts might get caught in, is this a hate crime? Is this a hate incident? Is this a bully incident? And I think we have to talk about the diversive ways that the violence is taking place, because I think also our students are a reflection of our society. They are not better than the current society, and we have to do our work to ensure that they do become better than the current generation that's leading.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Definitely, I think the supervisor and I and my colleague Clara understand there's a lot of work ahead of us, and that's why we had this forum to educate each other on this issue. And my office is definitely open for anybody who have any good bill ideas and any suggestions. I have introduced all my staff members, both from Sacramento and locally, so feel free to contact them. And with that, Supervisor, do you have any closing comment?
No, just thank you again. I kind of made my closing comments earlier, but again, thank you very much, and thank you to all who attended, and even those who had to leave already. We appreciate very much all the turnout.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you for your patience. Apologize, we're running a little bit late. All right, this meeting is concluded. Kimberly, do you have anything to say? No, thank you very much for your patience. You behaved really, really well there.